Can you DoorDash my leadership skills? No, you can't. Nice try, but no, you can't. And I know that happens to be true because as I continue my consulting practice, those are some of the things that.
I want to take a break real quick just to let you know about a new show we've just added to the network. Up Next at Work, hosted by Gene and Kata Keel of the Devon Group. Fantastic show. If you're looking for something that pushes the norm, pushes the boundaries, has some really spirited conversations, Google Up Next at Work, Gene and Kata Keel from the Devon Group.
I encountered.
Hello and welcome to Backstage Pass, the HR Rockstar podcast. In the world of HR, talent, business, and more, there are times where you recognize top performers within the workplace. You may refer to them as rock stars in what they do. My thought was, why not combine my love of HR with my experience of 10 plus years performing shows around Michigan and the Midwest in my rock band, trying to be an actual rock star. Joining us today is one of those true leaders and rock stars within the HR and leadership space, Dr. Lee Meadows. If you're active within HR spaces, there's a strong chance you've seen Dr. Meadows speak at numerous events over the years. Perhaps you picked up his book, or you were lucky enough to have him as a professor during grad school. That is where I first met Dr. Meadows. His courses were a complete game changer to me in how I viewed school, my career within HR, and leadership in general. Dr. Meadows, welcome to the show.
Jay, thank you so much for having me. It's good to see you. When you say anything about being a student, I go, wow, how long has this been going on? It's always good to see you. You know, I'm happy about your success.
I appreciate it. There's times I play the what would Dr. Meadows do of how to approach certain topics or issues within the workplace. Great to finally connect. Can you just share a little bit about your journey and how you became an expert with leadership within the HR space? What initially drew you to the world of HR strategy and leadership development? You've worked in academia, corporate HR, consulting, really how those experiences shaped your perspective on HR's role.
I was actually drawn to it out of higher education and my time at Michigan State when I worked for what was then the University Housing Program. So I was an area director. I had staff of resident assistants, graduate advisors, and it was through those trainings and interactions and those conversations that in many ways led me to the world of HR. When I left Michigan State, one of the things that I was lucky enough to have was an HR-related job, going to work for General Motors. And it was there where the whole field just opened up to me. It was, fascinating from the training and development end, from the organizational development end, from writing policies. General Motors was just this beast, if you will, of HR opportunities. And I pursued them to the best that I could, getting a chance to travel around and be a part of the General Motors culture and going to different places. And I guess I more or less immersed myself in it. In much the same way that, you immerse yourself in, playing for a rock band. So how do you get good at it? You got to immerse yourself in it. Every time you're doing something, you learn something from it. Don't give it a lot of thought and then move on to the next one. As just you keep doing it and keep doing it. And the further I got along with it, the more I was compelled and convinced that HR was truly my calling. And so from that point forward, it's just a question of shaping the career to fit that, so that ultimately when I landed at Walsh College, teaching management and leadership courses, the things that I enjoy most, the thing that I wanted to do as part of my commitment to Walsh was, I said, well, let me see if I can help bring HR more into the fold at Walsh. And Walsh was very receptive to it. And so for the remaining years, that was always my focus. How to become good at HR in terms of teaching in the classroom, also maintaining some kind of consulting practice on the side. So bringing all those elements together. And it's been one of those journeys where I never needed to look back because everything in front of me was just worked out so well. So that's kind of the long and short of it without getting into too much detail.
It's really like the 10,000 hours mindset. Malcolm Gladwell says of do something for 10,000 hours, you're going to be an expert at it, whether it's guitar, leadership training. There's so many things. You got to put in the time. And we live in an instant gratification world now where people want everything now. We used to say there's the crock pot method and the microwave approach.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's even the microwave approach. I think people are like, they want it now.
Yeah.
Because you can have everything delivered in your door within a matter of minutes if you're willing to pay for it.
Yeah, you can do. Can you DoorDash my leadership skills? No, you can't. Yeah. Nice try, but no, you can't. And I know that happens to be true because even as I continue my consulting practice, those are some of the things that I encounter. Well, how do I get good at it? How do I do it? It's like, I want to get good at it right away. Well, you can't. You got to do stuff, do well or not do well, figure out what that is, and then move on to the next one. And that in and of itself that's how people become experts at something. They just immerse themselves in it and stay with it. And the real key being what they're immersed in is something that they enjoy doing. As you know, that always comes out, whether you enjoy doing it or not. It always shows itself.
Well, it's funny you said about can you DoorDash your leadership? It's with all the snow we've had here in Metro Detroit recently. There's a funny meme that went around with a cartoon picture of a father handing his son the shovel and said, "No, son, there's not an app for that." And now, of course, there is an app for that. You can find people on demand to shovel your driveway.
They'll come shovel your driveway.
Whether it's leadership within an education facility, a corporate environment, or within a band, they all intersect in some way or another.
Yeah, it's this instant accessibility. There's a lot of good sides to that, but it does tend to take somewhat away from the immersive experience that makes you good at what you do.
I've fallen in love with HR as my chosen career path. What that looks like, for the remainder of my career, who knows? It's hard to predict the future. Industries that you want to work in or you have an interest in. But how do you see the role of HR evolving, like in today's rapidly changing business environment? And honestly, what are some of the biggest leadership challenges organizations are facing right now?
Some of the biggest challenges that they're facing are challenges, for the most part, we haven't seen before. There's still a mindset out there that we are labor surplus. Because if you put the word global, then that makes it sound like there are people everywhere. Yeah, there are. But the issue, do you have access to them? Globally competitive workplaces and, and the impact that those have had. A lot of the CEOs haven't faced these kinds of challenges. Technology, IT, that's becoming a whole area in which I don't know if we're chasing it or it's chasing us, or I'm not exactly sure where the chase is, but the horse is clearly out in the field and running, and we're trying to keep up with that. Most CEOs have never had keep up with those kinds of things. So for anybody working in HR, the primary responsibility, I think, is to be as knowledgeable about the things that are trending and impacting life in an organization, and being mindful of making sure that your organizational members know that. All right. One of the things that I've learned when I'm doing presentations is that there clearly is an HR body of knowledge. You and I can sit and have a conversation. If we say 5 generations in the workplace, if we talk about the hybrid workplace, if we talk about AI recruiting, those topics make sense to you and I because we have them all the time. It's people outside of our profession who don't really know what's happening. Because one of the things that I do when I'm talking to a group of non-HR folks, I'll ask a question like, how many of you know about the 5 generations in the workplace? And if there's 50 people in the room, maybe 3. How many of you know about, AI as a recruiting tool? If there's 50 people in the room, maybe 4. And what that has shown me over the years is that while our inner circle of HR folks know and understand these particular trends and topics, what we have to do a better job is conveying that to folks outside of it. We can't assume that they know. We have to take the knowledge to them. Because once you make them aware that this is what's driving the talent shortage, this is what's driving AI in the workplace, this is what's driving the the triad approach to work, the in-person, hybrid, and work from home model. These are the things that are driving that. And here's some of the reasons for it. So as individuals in any kind of leadership role, the way you think about leading people now has to be very different than what was 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, because there's a whole different set of elements that's driving this workforce. There's almost a fearlessness aspect around, around a certain generation. By fearlessness, I mean people who aren't afraid to not be working. Well, I'm from a generation that preceded me with the thought of not having a job. That was ranked up there with like one of the greatest things you could have. How could you not have it? So, you all built your world around the fact that you had to do what you needed to do to keep a job. Well, if I'm a manager who's coming through that mindset and I'm working with employees who think about work entirely different, that's going to be confusing to me. It's trying to scare them into coming to work, and all it did was keep them from coming to work. So then, we and HR have to make sure managers understand that you're not kowtowing. All right, you're not putting up with bad performance. What you're dealing with is a talent pool of individuals who think about work in a completely different manner. They want to work, all right? They want to work, but they're not afraid to not work. So what do you do with that? Just that one aspect of it, and even the general tensions. Even though it sounds trendy, you and I and every HR person on the planet knows that. But there is something to 5 generations in the workplace. We just sit around and make that up. That is indeed true. All right. And it's true. And whatever tensions you're feeling from that is because when all of these generations are in the workplace at the same time, it creates its own form of chaos. It can be managed. All right. It can be managed. But the only way before you manage it, you've had to first understand that it's true, why it's there, and then why you need to pivot your leadership style to accommodate that.
It brings up a lot of what companies and leadership are facing right now. It's 2025, and hopefully these podcasts are going to be timeless. 5 years ago, our world looked very different.
Yeah.
We were in the middle of a pandemic. This is February 2025, and many people thought, well, that's still in Europe. It's not in the U.S. yet. Little did we know what was 4 weeks away. That was a once in a generation event for a lot of people. Many organizations were able to pivot. Some were not. Versus being able to do your job from a basement in your home or a kitchen table on your laptop. But I look back, and about a week ago, I had a bunch of old YouTube videos saved from about 5 years ago, and how all the tech companies were, remote work is the way of the future.
Yeah.
And this is going to be a game changer. Yeah. And then you start hearing some people say, but once this is over, maybe hybrid is the answer, because if you can do your job from Denver, they can do your job from Dubai or New Delhi. So you should always be in the office somehow, some way. And I said, I think it depends on your role, the culture, the company. We see this complete return to office mandates in a lot of organizations across very different industries. Some it makes sense, some it doesn't. I know some global teams, okay, I have to go to the office, but I'm on calls at 6 a.m. because my team's in Eastern Europe. Who am I collaborating with in the office besides people at the coffee maker, which those relationships are valuable. With return to office, the push and pull with that, labor market up and down in terms of, is it an employer market, employee market? What are some strategies from your perspective that companies can use to engage and retain top talent in a competitive market?
Everything starts with leadership. Everything, from top to bottom. In that there are still too many traditional models about how people get into leadership roles. I'm always an advocate of internal promotions as a reward for good performance to individuals who to go into leadership roles. I mean, there's a certain level of stability that comes with that. The problem with that is that if we aren't training that individual and the appropriate leadership skills, we set that person up for failure. Because to assume that they know just because they've been promoted is an erroneous assumption. You have to think about, well, this person is being promoted because he or she has the requisite understanding of the job. They seem very good at building relationships and getting things done. Well, the thing that's where it stops is naive. That's just the beginning. That allows you to sit in that supervisory role. But then the organization is obligated to say, as long as you're in this role, here is the skill set that you need to have to be successful. So when you start thinking about internal strategies, I don't think about it from HR's standpoint only, but HR's influence in saying to the organization, everything starts with our leaders. And if we're going to promote people into roles, what we need to have is an internal curriculum, skill-based, that says, if you occupy this role in this organization, here's the skill set that you need to have. Here's how we're going to help you get that. And here's the reason why you need to have it. Because this workforce is different. All right. They're not, if you're wondering if folks are like you, they aren't like you, but we need them in the organization. So being able to distinguish between what's a generational way of thinking about performance versus someone who's just a poor performer, the two are not the same thing. But if you don't know that, the assumption is that they are the same thing. I think one of the other things that we in HR have, what we have to do is become a lot more assertive about what are the things that we do know. All right. I mean, you've been in it for a while. Everybody thinks they know how to do HR, other than the folks who do HR. So everybody's got an opinion as to how it's supposed to be done. Everybody has a perception about how it has to be done. Everyone thinks that it's an easy gig, and that you're essentially an enforcer. Clint Eastwood, the enforcer. So it's like, every time when I hear that, I just kind of sit and look at the person and say, you just don't have a clue, do you? It's like an accountant trying to explain to a singer how to carry a note.
Yeah, exactly.
And you go, well, do you know anything about singing? Well, I've hung around singers, but what's your expertise? My expertise is accounting. Then shouldn't you be advising an accountant on how to be a better accountant, as opposed to thinking you know how to do this? So I think we have to be a lot more assertive with the stuff at least less humble about it, because we do know stuff, Jay. We know about the 5 generations. We know about AI. We know about the talent shortage. There's any number of things that we know that have to be shared with the organization, so the organization can strategically begin to manage some of these issues that are coming up. And I'm still trying to figure out how you teach an organization or an individual to pivot when it's clear that I can see the iceberg ahead. Perhaps we should not wait till we get too close to it before we try to figure out how to turn this thing around. So when you talking about YouTube videos from 5 years ago, what tech folks were saying, remote work is the work of the future. Well, then folks should have been listening to that, because on March 13th, 2020, when everything shut down, the following Monday, we were up and running.
Right.
We were actually, and so for all those folks who said, well, it won't work, people need to be in the office, that's productive, people need to be seen and all that. That blew all that out the window, every one of those assumptions. Gallup followed the productivity folks during that time. They were just as productive, if not more. We created a whole group that didn't exist before called remote workers. And that's individuals who absolutely refuse to come back to the office, no matter how you threaten. And while folks saying a hybrid is a good model, and I guess that's the compromise between the two, ordering folks back to work or else, well, that hasn't played well for the few organizations that have done the or else, because folks will go, then I'll take the or else. Well, now you've got a lesser number of folks coming back to the workplace. I just think that this whole notion of not accepting the truth and promoting a false narrative. For a number of these organizations, when you ask folks, they say, well, why should people come back to work? Well, they're more productive. The interactions are a lot better. You can see the productivity and all that. Well, Gallup and other research organizations followed that. It turns out that's not true. They're just as productive. There are some folks who are at a stage in their career, they're going, I don't need the relationships in the office. I just want to get the work done. Or it has allowed them to manage their overall lifestyle in a way that allows them to be just as productive, if not more so. So with that, for any HR professional, I think it's important to challenge any and all false narratives that people put out there about stuff they think they know when you know better or you know different. And being able to challenge that in such a way that you both enlighten, inform, and educate, so that when folks are engaging, non-HR folks are engaging, they're at least a lot more aware about things that are.
Yeah, it's one of those things coming out of COVID in 21 and 22. We saw the labor market explode.
Yeah.
I think there were a few different studies where there were 3 or 4 jobs for every individual looking for one. I think anyone that was working might have looked over their shoulder going, maybe I should meet that headhunter or recruiter for coffee, on my way into the office, or have that long lunch to see what's out there to test the waters. It'll be very interesting because we know, as of now, early 2025, the labor market's contracting somewhat. Industries are going through different cycles.
Yeah.
It's post-election. We're dealing with tariffs. Again, this date stamped this in February 25. There's uncertainty around tariffs and other things related to that. But imagine if the labor market opens up again to where there's 2, 3, 4 jobs for every individual looking for one.
Right.
Is that going to change the dynamics where these return to office mandates are now loosening up because overnight see the value in remote work or hybrid work or flexible work, where some companies, they might let someone go to work from a relative's home in Texas or Oklahoma or California, be with maybe a sick parent, as the sandwich generation are going through.
Yeah.
You have young kids or teenagers or kids that are maybe entering college. So you have one set of challenges, and then your parents might be approaching an elderly stage or have some health challenges, and you want to be there for them. But it'll be really interesting to see if the labor market opens, whether it's because of retirements that are happening, every day, or technology changes. In early 25 or late 24, you didn't like this approach. Whatever the future is, you do like this approach. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. Besides return to office / hybrid / remote trends, are there any other emerging HR trends that really excite you right now, or maybe one that scares you?
Well, that's actually a good question, because the one that excites and scares is what I refer to as the career mobility now, and how generations think about what I refer to as managing their career portfolio. At one point in time, the whole focus was you manage your career upward in an organization for any extended amount of time. And I think a lot of that still exists. I think a lot of it still resonates, but it speaks in contradiction how later generations tend to think about things. I'm part of that generation where you stick and stay, don't dare go away. You gut it out. You don't leave a job because you don't like your boss. You stay with a job because you like getting paid. You get the stability. You get the benefits. You just stay in. Who said you had to be happy at work? This isn't a fun factory. It's where we come to get work done, and you get the work done. There was this whole straight lane approach to you go to work, and that's your lane, and that's just it. Well, again, what's been trending are individuals who don't tend to think of one organization as a place where they build their career, but looking at it, building a portfolio across several organizations. So the whole notion of being in a place, more than 3 years, for some folks, that's kind of frightening. Say, well, Dr. Meadows, I've been here 3 years. Do you think it ruins me in the market? No, I don't. Why would I think something like that? 3 years is a nice run. But no, if you did a 4th year, it would not hurt you. But there is that mindset that if I can't get the things that I want quickly in this organization, well, I'll just wrap my skills up in a bundle and market them to another organization who will benefit from that, and not giving that a single thought whatsoever. Well, again, that's a certain kind of fearlessness that comes with that, but it's also frightening for us in HR, because when those things happen, individual wants to leave an organization because they just don't want to be there, that's fine. But if they're leaving because advancement opportunities are, They don't have access to advancement opportunities. There's things going on with the person they report to, and they don't want to put up with it. Team stuff is getting in the way. Well, there's a less tolerance for that than there would have been years ago. Now the whole issue becomes, how do you get folks to both know and understand that you are now dealing with generations of folks for whom moving to another organization across their career is not that big a deal. And I like to think that it's gotten to the point now where those of us in HR, if we see that on somebody's resume, we're less threatened by it than we would have been 10 years ago. But we see gaps of unemployment in their resume. We're less scared of that than we would have been years ago, because people have reasonable explanations for gaps, right? They have reasonable explanations for, you only worked there a year and a half, but here's why. So it forces us to ask the why question to understand what's going on, as opposed to assuming that, well, this person is just gets bored very easily. Well, that's a different kind of dynamic. So I don't know if it means that, we have to break out the J.R.O. rock band every day, and play that in the atrium while folks are at work. But it does suggest that there's a certain liveliness, if you will, that I think folks are seeking when they come to the work. If you're going to make me come back to work, then I don't want to come back to some place that's boring. I don't want to come back to doing work that's boring. I'm going to come back to reporting to someone who's boring. It's got to be a little more exciting. Or I'll pack it up and go over to organization X, who's been recruiting me anyway. Again, that's exciting and frightening at the same time. Frightening from an HR point of view, because it's, the whole thing that we're into now is, how do you retain good talent? And we don't have as much control over that as we would like. So we have to make sure folks know this is what's going on. This is why it's an issue.
One of the things I saw when I led my previous team is, there are people that were top talent, and you wanted to give them stretch assignments. You knew that where we were in the year, promotional cycles, they were still 8 months away, and I couldn't do anything at that time because they were only done so many times per year. But let me have, sit in with something that's happening every other week, the different arm of HR that's onboarding new employees. Yes, going over policies, but to really understand, hey, do you see yourself in that role 6, 12, 18 months from now if that person were to be promoted? I told one person, I want to have you be part of that every other week for 2 months and find out you don't like it, versus applying for the role internally and then realizing, like, what did I just get myself into? The different skill sets you mentioned regarding talent, it leads me to someone else that I've been listening to a lot of. So I'm a huge fan of Prof G, also known as Scott Galloway. He teaches at NYU. He's made millions starting and selling businesses. That's one thing that he has said. People will call in and say, I do this during the day. I'm an engineer, or I work in finance, but I have this side hustle. And he's like, I think you should go all in on what you're, what you need to do, and don't have a side hustle. If you spend that much time doing what you do, you're going to grow that much faster in your main gig, can earn 20, 30, 40% more. You might have to switch organizations to do so, versus, a side hustle here or there where you're spending all this extra time. The only thing I'd push back on that is if you really have a different passion, you want to test something out. So you're an engineer, but you're going to do a complete pivot and be a photographer. There's a saying, you want to have the boat next to the dock before you make the leap and not fall into the lake. I can see both sides, where if you're all in going in your career, you also want to have that guidance of going, I do want to do this. I do want to be a photographer. I do want to go from engineering into culinary or whatever it might be. You want to have that boat close to the dock before you make the leap.
Well, but that makes sense. I mean, when you were talking about, the person you were working with, and I want you to do this, then find out if you like it. That's how you find out anything. You stick your toe in the water and try it out for a while. It may turn out that you love it. It may turn out that, no, this is a waste of my time. If it takes you away from something that you're not going to enjoy, then that's a good decision, because now you're not wasting time trying to find that out, because now that you know. And I think things like stretch assignments in the organization even when there's a cap on rotations and promotions and all that, that's still a good way for folks to find out, who also not be bored. Say, well, because that's what happens. Person reaches a certain point, they don't have any stretch assignments, there's nothing else, there's nothing more for them to do. So they start thinking about, well, maybe I can get mobility in another location. All right, that's what we have to share with folks.
Because it comes down to, you have 3 years experience doing X or Y. Well, do you really have 3 years experience, or did you do it 1 year and repeat it 3 times? You know, looking at different talent strategies with the current environment, one of the things I wanted to pick your brain on, because this was discussed when I was in school with you a number of years ago. DE&I is under attack right now.
Yeah.
At all levels. It's been one of the most misunderstood things. It's been completely turned upside down. Some people said, no, it started as one thing from a good place, and it went way too far in one direction. And then scrapping everything might be way too far in the other direction. There's so many companies that are announcing the rolling back of their DE&I programs and initiatives. And there's various reasons as to why they think they're doing that. And I'll let viewers and listeners Google that to figure that on their own if there's merit to that. With that being said, some companies, they're planting the flag in it. They're not rolling things back. Delta Airlines is one, Costco, Apple, as of February 2025. Yeah. What role does HR play in driving DEI initiatives? And is there anything that leaders can do that go beyond that? Like
HR's role, I think, where DEI is concerned, is to chase the false narrative, confront the false narrative, with facts and with truth, and with principles. Now, this whole thing with DEI got started because somebody somewhere got upset because they thought the process was discriminating against, and I'm going to say specifically white males, that somehow it became a quota system, that somehow it was favoritism. And the biggest damn lie that was perpetuated without any facts or evidence was that we're lowering standards to accommodate people of color. It's like, and I don't know where the hell somebody came up with that, because that's never been true. It's never been true. When it was affirmative action, it was never true. So somehow somebody got upset to decide to blame DEI, when the reality is DEI has been really about ensuring the rights of all individuals who are in that organization to have access to opportunities. Inclusion is about access to opportunities. It's never been about just bringing somebody in and just having them sit there. Why would you recruit any kind of talented person and not have them central to the things that are going on? Why would you do something like that? So it became a lot easier to blame DEI for planes falling out of the sky, financial systems trains running off the track, boats running into bridges, without anyone stopping to think and just using a common reasoning approach and saying, now, how would that as a policy cause a train to run off tracks in Ohio? How would that as a policy explain a boat running into a bridge? How would that as a policy explain fires in Los Angeles and any other silliness that came from that? If individuals were interested in really the evolution of DEI, then what we needed to have was frank conversations about its central purpose and what becomes the next steps. That's blown out the water now. Federal mandates. If you have DEI policies, you're not going to get federal funding. If you have DEI policies, we're going to look at it as a criminal investigation. If you have DEI, it's like all of a sudden it became crafted as this villain that it never was and never would be. But now that the narrative is out there and folks are chasing the false narrative, for those folks who are standing firm, what they are essentially saying is, but we have evidence to the contrary, right? We don't have political rhetoric. What we have is evidence to the contrary that says that's not true. So if we want to have a conversation about the evolution of DEI to a talent model that embraces the talents that individuals bring into a workplace, then let's talk about it from that standpoint. This whole criminal threats and all that, that's false narratives gone awry. And I think most reasonable people would sit for just a minute, if they sat and thought about it for just a minute, and say, I don't see how that's possible, right?
Johnny C. Taylor from SHRM, he's dealing with his own storm right now at SHRM, but one of the things that he said is focus on policy, not politics as an organization.
Right.
I agree with that to a point, but the reality is that policies are a result of politics.
Yeah.
And of legislation at the state or federal level, whether it's salary transparency laws in a handful of states. There was talk that was going to be rolling out federally under the Biden administration. Non-competes, they were gone. Who knows where they're going to be now?
Yeah.
Back to DEI for a moment, as things are being canceled, some, including rural farmers, are finding out they were part of that program for certain farm programs under the E of equity, because they finally got a shot to compete against a corporate farm. This also goes back to what you said earlier about everyone thinks they can do HR. They're just a fun police. I remember a previous director of mine, great leader. We had a leadership meeting and we talked about some challenges as we were coming out of COVID. And we had a hiring manager that ran a department flat out told us, your hiring practices are terrible. I can rip everything down and rebuild it from scratch and do better.
Mm-hmm.
This was a software engineer.
Yeah.
But then there's the reality of you post a position on your applicant tracking system, and in a matter of minutes or hours, you might have 100 applications.
Yeah.
Okay, so now what do you do? What is your process? Do they meet the minimum qualifications? Do they have the degree in X or Y that you, during your intake meeting, as the manager said, is required? What are those screening questions? How are we doing any kind of reporting as maybe a government contractor to ensure AAP reporting, EEO1 reporting? Is it a global company? Are you asking the right questions and making sure asking the wrong questions that are not allowed by law?
Yeah.
You don't want to ask those questions because you can make a perceived mistake, and a costly mistake, because there's employment attorneys just waiting for that phone call.
Exactly. They're lining up.
A friend of mine, he lives in a different state, and he had called me right before the holidays, and someone that was close to him had applied for an internal position at their company. And they were told, well, you're pregnant. We didn't think you'd be interested in this position. This person new to working, there's laws against this. I always like to say, this is why HR and talent acquisition exists, to partner with managers and really help them understand these are the bounds we have to work within. Even if it's from a good place, you're trying to understand, you have to ensure you're following all the laws and procedures, internal policies of the organization.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of things around that you don't have to do. And if individuals just stop long enough and just deal with the demographics issue, and you ask yourself, from a pure demographic standpoint, where's our talent coming from? Who are they? And you create a model that accesses the best talents within that demographic range, and it's done in such a way that you don't have to worry about lawsuits if you're doing the right thing. But to put out a false narrative that suggests, hints by way of innuendo or inference or whatever, that a particular set of policies or strategy is deliberately and willfully discriminating against specific individuals versus trying to accommodate the needs of the organization in the best way that it can, given the demographics that it works for. Well, that's just unfortunate, and it will bear itself out in time, right? A year from now, if you and I are having this conversation, we'll be talking about the demographics, and what the demographics suggest. All right, if the conversation is going to be about merit, well, that whole application process you just talked about has got to change, both externally in terms of bringing people in, and internally in terms of moving folks up in an organization. If it's going to be merit-based, then the way you go about that is very different. And in many ways, when I've had conversations with any number of folks about this whole thing, a lot of them say, yeah, but we're using merit anyway. I mean, that's always Who said the merit wasn't being used? All right. Yeah, a false narrative. So I think that's our next challenge.
As we're wrapping up here, we've talked a lot about different talent strategies and challenges that HR is facing. But in a sentence or two, what's just one last piece of career advice you would give to HR professionals looking to grow in their careers, whether they're just starting out, or they've been in the market for a year? Is there a sentence or two you give to someone to grow their HR?
One, you know more than you're willing to admit. All right. You know more than you're willing to admit. The first thing is get confidence around the stuff that you know. Even if you're 23 years old, coming in out of a bachelor's program, going into an organization, into an HR role, you know so much more about HR than a 42-year-old manager working in a completely different department who's been experiencing stuff day in and day out but doesn't know that. So you know more than you're willing to admit. Two, act on what you know and act on it with certainty. What's the point in having a body of knowledge if you don't get a chance to use it and show it?
Right.
After that is you got to know how to work relationships in an organization. Right? Always. But for all my HR colleagues, here's the other thing. You are not a second-class citizen to anybody at that table. Not at all. If you're vice president of human resources, your role is just as important as a vice president for operations. You just bring a different body of knowledge. And I want my younger ones coming into the profession, the ones who are already there, to know that for a fact, right? You are not a second-class citizen when it comes to being an organization. Here's my Meadowsism. Don't be concerned about having a seat at the table. Own the room, right? Own the room.
This is our encore section, like a band does an encore. One of the things that I like to ensure that human resources does is to ensure that the human stays in human resources. Human resource professionals, they're human too, and like to have fun. They're employees or clients at the end of the day too. A couple of lightning round questions for you, Dr. Meadows.
Alrighty.
If you were to share your Spotify playlist, what are some artists or bands I would find if I were to look at your phone?
Well, you're going to start with Earth, Wind, and Fire. I mean, I always, after I fell in love with the group, I always thought that whenever they would come to town, they'd be known as Earth, Wind, Fire, and Lee. Because I still want to be on stage with it. So you're going to hear all Earth, Wind, and Fire. Now, you're also going to go back to my ancestral roots of Detroit and my Motown upbringing. And so you're going to hear a lot of classic Temptations. All right, because that's a part of me. Now, I'm also going to switch up on you, and you're going to hear some James Taylor. It's someone I just enjoyed, as well as some Carly Simon, and then you're going to hear some Philadelphia sound. You're going to hear the sound of Philadelphia, the MFSB orchestra. Yeah, that would be my playlist right off the top of my head.
Yeah, I might have to make a playlist with some bands and artists, and I'll email it to you. We can share things back and forth.
Well, and here's another song you're going to hear. You're going to hear Joe Cocker's "You Can Leave Your Hat On." Joe Cocker is amazing, but for 9.5 weeks when he did that soundtrack, "You Can Leave Your Hat On," that's the ultimate fun song.
What is a guilty pleasure of yours?
Bugs Bunny cartoons is a guilty pleasure. Every now and then when I'm tired of the madness, all right, there's a channel I can go to where I can watch Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck and Elmer Fudd and Foghorn Leghorn and just fall back into that, and watch Daffy Duck get blown up every time. Watch Bugs Bunny outsmart everybody, and it's just that the group of folks who created the animation back in the day, they got to be the most hysterical people I've ever met in my life. So that that's one guilty pleasure, and then the other is chocolate.
The Bugs Bunny, that's a metaphor for, I think, a career in HR, because it can describe your day in a nutshell.
Yeah.
I think I might try that, because that probably has more value than watching trash reality TV show on Bravo or something.
I'm telling you, it's great therapy, because it's a cartoon and use the cartoon characters, but the way they did it back then made it a lot more fun. So, after an hour, you can sit back and go, okay, that's good. I can move on.
I think I'll share one of my guilty pleasures with you, since we have such a rich history, is that one of the things that I do is I love cheesy 80s music. It could be hair metal, it could be new wave stuff from early 80s. And what happens is that my family doesn't realize that not only do I know the song, but I know the word, every single word to the song. So I'll play it maybe as we're cooking dinner, we're hanging out, we're cleaning around the house, and I'll sing it word for word, and their mouths will hit the floor and go, I don't know what's worse, that you actually know the stuff. Those are the little things, you try to do.
Well, I pride myself. My wife, I only have the one son. He's 30, and I pride myself on never having been a normal dad. And I think that's one of the first things he'll say now at 30 that he wouldn't have said at 20 or 19. He would have said weird, but now I think he goes, you were you had a few shingles short of a roof, but other than that, you were honest.
30. The last time I heard you mention his name, correct me if I'm wrong, he was working on mystery novels, or that's what you like to read yourself?
That's what I like to read myself.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, that's right. You wouldn't, I think when I was talking about him in class with you, Jay, he may have been just starting middle school.
Yeah. Sounds about right.
Don't sit and smile like that.
As we wind down here, where could people find you if they got entertainment out of this interview? And Dr. Lee Meadows is great. I want him to speak at one of my events, or I just want to pick his brain on a topic. Where could they get in touch with you?
My LinkedIn page. That's the only thing I use these days now, Jay. Just my LinkedIn page. It's simpler for me. It's easy to reach because I don't check a lot of this stuff every day, but I check LinkedIn every day.
If you want to get in touch with Dr. Meadows, his information will be in the show notes, where to find him on LinkedIn. Thanks for tuning in.